Hello, and welcome to today's story. My name is Philip, and I like to dive deep into scary Asian stories and cover them in my videos. If you have an interesting story you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. I always read all comments. For now, let's get into today's story, where we have a few terrifying stories to share. One of them takes us into the heart of northern Bangkok, where a quiet stretch of road hides a haunting that has terrified taxi drivers for decades. This story is known as The Women in Black of Wat, Saming Nari. It begins like any other late-night drive. The streets are dimly lit, the hum of engines echoes through the empty roads, and the city feels half asleep. But for those behind the wheel after midnight, this particular road near the temple carries an unspoken dread. Drivers speak of two women, dressed entirely in black, standing silently by the roadside. Pale faces, expressionless eyes, always together, always waiting. They wave for a cab, sit quietly in the back seat, and whisper only one destination, Wat Saming Nari. But when the driver reaches the gates and turns around to collect the fare, the back seat is empty. Bangkok never truly sleeps. Even after midnight, the distant sound of motorbikes and street vendors echoes faintly through the humid air. The orange glow of streetlights casts long, wavering shadows on the cracked pavement, and the smell of grilled food lingers, mixing with exhaust and rain-soaked concrete. It's the kind of night when the city feels both alive and strangely hollow, like something unseen is moving just beyond the edges of sight. Somchai, a 2-year-old taxi driver, had been driving these streets for nearly 2 decades. He knew every shortcut, every red light camera, and every stretch of road where drunks like to wander into traffic. It was an ordinary job that paid the bills, and like most drivers, he had his favorite routes, safe ones, well-lit ones. But some nights, when business was slow, he would take the longer way, drifting into the quieter areas where fewer taxis dared to go. That's how he found himself driving past Wat Saming Nari that night. The temple loomed like a silent guardian over the neighborhood, its tall gates faintly visible through the mist. During the day, it was peaceful, a place of prayer, lined with banyan trees, and the scent of incense drifting through the air. But after midnight, everything changed. The temple's walls seemed taller, darker. The air grew heavier. The hum of the city fell away until only the faint buzz of the streetlights remained. Somchai wasn't one to believe in ghosts. He had heard the stories, of course, every driver had. Tales of 2 sisters who died horribly on the nearby train tracks decades ago. They were said to appear near the temple in the middle of the night, dressed in mourning black, their faces pale and calm as they hailed passing taxis. Drivers who stopped claimed their cars would grow unnaturally cold, their meters would flicker and freeze, and by the time they reached the temple, the women would be gone. But Somchai told himself, these were just stories, superstitions, the kind of thing people made up to pass the time during long shifts. Still, that night, something about the air felt different. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the road still shimmered under his headlights. The radio crackled with static before falling silent, and for a moment it felt as though the whole world was holding its breath. He rubbed his eyes, weary from a 14-hour shift. The streets were nearly empty now. A few stray dogs darted between alleys, and the occasional motorbike roared past, then vanished into the distance. As he drove past the intersection near the temple, he slowed down. His headlights caught movement up ahead, 2 figures standing by the roadside. At first, he thought they were just women waiting for a ride home. Bangkok was full of night shift workers, after all. But as he drew closer, his grip on the steering wheel tightened. They were both wearing long black dresses that hung still despite the soft night breeze. Their faces were pale, almost colorless, and they stood perfectly still, side by side, their heads slightly tilted as if listening for something. Somchai hesitated. His foot hovered over the brake. Every instinct told him to keep driving, to look away, to pretend he hadn't seen them. But his mind reasoned against it. Maybe they really did need a ride. Maybe it was his imagination playing tricks after too many hours on the road. The meter ticked softly, waiting for his decision. The temple gates glimmered faintly in the distance. He let out a slow breath, glanced once more in the rearview mirror, and turned his car toward the roadside. The women didn't move, not until he stopped directly in front of them. Then, in perfect unison, they stepped forward, their movements slow, deliberate. Without a word, they opened the back door and slid inside, their dresses whispering against the seat. Somchai felt the air change instantly. The temperature dropped, his windshield fogged slightly at the edges, and a faint scent of damp earth filled the car. He started the engine again, pretending not to notice the chill crawling down his spine. The temple gates weren't far, but somehow that short drive already felt much, much longer. The car rolled forward, the hum of the engine, the only sound that dared to fill the silence. The women in black sat in the back seat, motionless, their pale faces barely visible in the rearview mirror. The glow from the dashboard light cast a faint green hue across Somchai's hands as he gripped the wheel tighter. He tried to glance at them casually, but every time his eyes met theirs in the mirror, they seemed unfocused, staring not at him, but through him, as though they were seeing something far beyond the walls of the cab. He cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. "What's Samia Nari, right?" he asked, softly, forcing a polite tone. No response. He repeated it in Thai, a bit louder this time. "The temple? Wat Samia Nari?" Still nothing. The only sound came from the faint clicking of the meter and the rhythmic squeak of the windshield wipers as they brushed away invisible moisture. The air inside the taxi grew denser, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like it was pressing down on his chest. Somchai glanced out the window. The streets were eerily empty now. The last of the late-night food stalls shut down. Even the dogs had disappeared. Every few seconds, he caught the reflection of the two women in the mirror sitting side by side, hands folded neatly in their laps, their gazes fixed straight ahead. Neither of them blinked. He felt a shiver creep up the back of his neck. Something about their stillness didn't seem right. Passengers fidgeted. They scrolled through their phones, adjusted their seats, looked out the window. These women did none of that. They seemed detached, as though their bodies were present, but their minds were elsewhere, like they were sleepwalking through the ride. Somchai tried to distract himself. He reached for the radio and turned the dial, hoping for some background noise. Static. He switched channels. More static. No music. No news. Not even a distant broadcast. Just a faint whispering hum that rose and fell, almost like someone breathing through the speakers. He quickly turned it off. His hands were sweating now. The steering wheel felt slick beneath his palms. He forced a small laugh, muttering to himself, "You're tired, that's all. Just tired." But as the taxi approached a narrow bridge that crossed the old train tracks, the temperature dropped suddenly. His breath fogged in front of him, and a faint mist began to form inside the car. The windows, freshly wiped, started to cloud from the inside. He turned up the defroster, but it didn't help. The fog thickened, curling slowly along the edges of the windshield like fingers pressing inward. He adjusted the rearview mirror again, his heart thudding. The women were still there, but something about them seemed different now. The faint yellow light from the street lamp flashed across their faces as the car passed under it, and for a brief second, He saw it clearly. Their skin was too pale, almost gray. Their lips were colorless, dry, and slightly parted as though frozen mid-whisper. He swallowed hard and tried to steady his breathing. "Almost there," he murmured. The temple wasn't far now, just a few more turns. He wanted to drop them off, take their fare, and forget this ride ever happened. But then the taxi meter flickered. Once. Twice. Then froze completely. The glowing numbers vanished, replaced by a blank, black screen. He tapped it, thinking it was a glitch. The screen flickered back to life for a second, but instead of numbers, strange symbols appeared, lines and shapes that looked like fractured characters, impossible to read. He stared at it, confused, until a faint clicking sound drew his attention back to the back seat. One of the women had turned her head slightly. Her face was still expressionless, but her eyes were now locked directly on him in the mirror. Her gaze was steady, almost unblinking. The other woman remained still, facing forward. Somchai's mouth went dry. He tried to smile nervously. "Almost there," he repeated, forcing a weak laugh. "Just a few more minutes." The woman said nothing, but her lips began to move slowly, soundlessly. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the shape of her mouth forming syllables that didn't make sense. It was like watching someone speak underwater. Her head tilted just slightly, and then she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was faint, wrong, her lips stretching in a slow, uneven curve that didn't reach her eyes. Her expression stayed still while her mouth kept moving, forming silent words that no sound followed. The other woman finally moved. Her hand, pale and thin, reached forward and pressed lightly against the glass of the window beside her. Somchai heard the faint sound of her fingernails tapping once, twice, 3 times. Then, from outside the car, came a low rumble. He flinched. A train horn echoed somewhere in the distance. But there hadn't been trains running that line in years. The city had shut it down after the accident, the one that killed the 2 sisters. The sound grew louder. The faint vibration rolled under the tires as if something massive was passing beneath the bridge. Somchai's breath quickened. He looked ahead, but the road was empty. The headlights illuminated nothing but fog and asphalt. Then the temperature dropped again. So cold, his hands started to tremble. His rearview mirror began to frost over from the edges inward. Through the haze, he saw the faint reflection of 2 faces still, expressionless, sitting in silence. He blinked once, and for the briefest moment, he could have sworn there were no faces at all. Just the outlines of 2 figures dressed in black, sitting in the back seat where breath should have fogged the glass but didn't. The sound of the phantom train faded slowly into the night. Somchai gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He didn't know if he should keep driving or stop. But one thing was certain, he could no longer pretend that this was just another passenger ride. Something unnatural was sitting behind him, something that did not belong to the living. Somchai's mind raced as he drove through the thinning fog, each second stretching painfully long. The car's heater was still running, yet his breath came out in clouds. The 2 women hadn't spoken a single word since the start of the ride, but somehow the silence between them had changed. It felt heavier, charged, as though the air inside the taxi had thickened into something alive. He tried to calm himself by focusing on the road ahead. The streetlights flickered in uneven intervals, casting the car in alternating flashes of gold and shadow. The temple's main road wasn't far now, another 5 minutes at most. But the more he drove, the more he began to feel that time itself had started to stretch. The distance didn't seem to close. The GPS screen froze. The glowing arrow showing his position simply stopped moving. A low hum vibrated through the car speakers, again faint, rhythmic, like someone breathing right behind his ear. Somchai quickly turned off the radio, but the sound didn't stop. It continued softly, as if it were now coming from within the car itself. Then, something strange happened. From the corner of his eye, he noticed faint movement outside the passenger window, just a shadow, gliding silently beside the car. It was keeping pace with them. He blinked hard, thinking it was a trick of the light, but when he glanced again, he saw it more clearly. A shape, humanoid, running alongside the taxi, its limbs jerky and unnatural, its head tilting in short, sharp movements. He slammed his foot on the accelerator. The taxi roared forward, but the shape outside didn't fall behind it, kept up, effortlessly, like it wasn't bound by the same rules of speed or distance. Then, without warning, the headlights flickered and went dark. The road vanished into blackness. The engine sputtered, but didn't stop. Only the dashboard glowed faintly now, its green light reflecting off the windshield like dim phosphorescence. Somchai's pulse hammered in his ears. He didn't dare look back again. His instincts screamed at him not to, but his curiosity clawed harder. Slowly, his eyes lifted toward the rear-view mirror. The two women were gone. The back seat was empty. He slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched as the taxi skidded to a stop in the middle of the deserted road. His chest heaved as he turned around, scanning the back seat, his flashlight from the console trembling in his hand. Nothing. The seatbelts still hung in place. No sign anyone had ever been there. Then came a faint knock. It was coming from outside the trunk. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Somchai froze. Another 3 knocks, this time louder. His flashlight flickered as if reacting to it. He forced himself to move, opening the driver's door with shaky hands. The night air hit him like a wave of ice. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but instead he circled to the back of the taxi. The knocking stopped. He stood there for several seconds, heart pounding, before he reached for the latch. The metal felt colder than it should. He pulled it open slowly. The trunk was empty, but a faint smell wafted out, something metallic, earthy, mixed with a hint of incense. It was the scent often found near temple cremation grounds. Suddenly, the sound of another engine broke the silence. Somchai turned and saw the headlights of an approaching vehicle. A motorcycle slowed beside him, its rider pulling off his helmet, a man in his 40s, wearing a temple guard's uniform. His expression was tense, his eyes darting to the car. "Are you all right?" the man asked in Thai, his voice wary. Somchai nodded shakily. "Yeah, just the car's acting up. I thought I saw something." The guard frowned. "You shouldn't stop here," he said quickly. "Not this close to the temple, not at this hour." Somchai hesitated. "Why not?" The man's gaze shifted to the back seat of the taxi, his face tightening. "You picked them up, didn't you?" The words hit like ice water. "Who?" The guard's expression darkened. "The sisters, the ones in black. I told the monks last week someone would see them again." Somchai's throat went dry. "They were just passengers. They're not passengers," the guard interrupted sharply. "They died here, on those tracks, right behind the temple. Every year around this time, someone sees them, and anyone who talks to them." He trailed off, eyes narrowing, as he noticed something behind Somchai. The temple bells began to ring in the distance, a hollow, uneven chime that echoed through the night air. The guard's flashlight flickered once, twice, then died completely. Somchai turned slowly toward the car. The headlights had turned back on by themselves. Through the windshield, he saw them 2 figures sitting once again in the back seat. perfectly still, perfectly waiting. The guard took a step back, his voice low and trembling. "Leave. Don't stop until you're far from here, and whatever you do, don't look back again." Somchai didn't argue. He jumped back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and floored the accelerator. The tires screeched as the taxi lurched forward, the guard's flashlight beam vanishing into the darkness behind him. As the temple faded from view, the temperature dropped again, lower than before. The smell of incense filled the air, stronger now, mixed with something faintly metallic. Somchai kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. He could feel the weight of two unseen stairs pressing into the back of his neck. And though he didn't dare look in the mirror again, he knew he wasn't driving alone anymore. Somchai drove like a man possessed. The wheels screeched against the slick asphalt, the headlights cutting through a tunnel of mist that refused to end. The city that had once been alive with neon and chatter now looked deserted, every building shuttered, every alley swallowed by shadow. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. All he could think about were the words the temple guard had said. "They're not passengers." But no matter how fast he drove, he couldn't escape the cold. It clung to him like damp fog, crawling under his skin, seeping into his bones. The dashboard lights flickered weakly. The GPS remained frozen on the same spot near Wat Samian Nari, as if he hadn't moved at all. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine roared, but the scenery outside didn't change. Every turn he took led him back to the same stretch of road, the same row of streetlights, the same half-collapsed noodle stall. It was as if the world had folded in on itself, trapping him in a loop that wouldn't let him go. His pulse pounded in his ears. "No, no, no," he whispered. "This can't be happening." He forced himself to glance at the rearview mirror. They were still there. The two women in black sat side by side in the back seat once more, their faces unnaturally calm, but something about them had changed. Their heads were slightly tilted toward each other now, as if whispering a secret. Their long hair fell over their faces, hiding their eyes. Somchai's breath hitched. "What do you want?" he muttered, his voice trembling. No answer, just that unbearable stillness. Then a faint tapping sound filled the car. It came from behind him again, slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. He looked in the mirror. Neither woman had moved. The sound grew louder, echoing from the trunk, the windows, even the dashboard. It wasn't random. It had rhythm. 3 taps, then silence, then 3 more. He realized with a jolt that it mimicked the sound of a train rolling over the tracks. "Stop it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please, stop it." The car jerked suddenly, as if something massive had struck it from behind. The tires skidded. The seatbelt locked tight across his chest. His headlights blinked, and suddenly, he wasn't on the road anymore. The taxi had come to a stop beside a rusted metal gate. Beyond it, faint lights flickered in the distance. A sign above the entrance read, "Wat Samian Nari." He had somehow ended up back at the temple gates. Somchai's stomach dropped. He didn't remember turning. He didn't even remember slowing down. He turned off the engine, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it. The air was completely still. Not even the crickets dared to make a sound. He turned slowly in his seat to face the back. Empty. For the 3rd time, they were gone. Somchai's trembling hand reached for the door handle. He stepped out, his shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The temple grounds stretched out before him, bathed in faint orange light from an old lamppost. The gate creaked open on its own. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing weakly. "Is anyone there?" A faint breeze answered him, carrying with it the scent of incense and wilted flowers. Somewhere beyond the gate, A soft, metallic clang echoed like something striking iron. He followed the sound, drawn in despite himself. The narrow path wound around the side of the temple, past crumbling stone walls and rows of weathered Buddha statues. The air was thicker here, heavy with moisture and the faint hum of distant chanting. But there was something else underneath it, a low, rumbling vibration, rhythmic and deep. It was the sound of a train. Somchai froze. There hadn't been trains on this line for decades. Yet now, the unmistakable clatter of metal wheels echoed in the night. The sound grew louder. He turned toward the noise, and his blood ran cold. Through the mist, he saw them. The two women in black stood in the middle of the abandoned tracks. Their long hair blew gently in a breeze that he couldn't feel. Their dresses rippled faintly as if under water. "Why?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why me?" Neither woman moved. Then, slowly, one of them raised her arm and pointed directly at him. Her fingers were thin, trembling slightly. The other began to take a step forward, then another. Their feet didn't make a sound as they moved. Somchai stumbled back, tripping over a loose plank, falling hard onto the ground. Pain shot through his leg, but he didn't dare take his eyes off them. The first woman tilted her head slowly to the side until her neck bent at an unnatural angle. Her hair slid away from her face, revealing what lay beneath. Her eyes were gone. Where they should have been were two hollow sockets, dark and wet, glistening faintly in the moonlight. Somchai screamed. The other woman bent forward sharply, her neck twitching. A faint crack echoed through the air, like the snapping of dry branches. Then came the sound again, the train horn, louder now, deafening, rushing toward them, though no train was in sight. Somchai scrambled backward, desperate to get away. The ground beneath him began to tremble, the gravel rattling like something alive. He turned, running toward his car, gasping for air. Behind him, the women's figures blurred, their outlines flickering as if the world around them couldn't decide if they were real or not. He reached the car, slamming the door shut, fumbling with the keys. The engine sputtered once, twice, then finally roared to life. His hands shook so violently he could barely hold the wheel. But as he turned on the headlights, his heart stopped cold. The two women were already there. They sat in the back seat again, soaked as if from rain that hadn't fallen, their hair plastered to their pale faces. One leaned forward slowly, her voice a whisper that barely broke through the roar of the engine. "You took us home." And before Somchai could react, the horn of the invisible train screamed once more so close. Now it seemed to come from within the car itself, followed by a blinding flash of white light. Then everything went silent. When Somchai opened his eyes again, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The world around him felt drained of color, washed in shades of gray and blue. The air was still, thick with a faint metallic scent that clung to his throat. His taxi sat motionless at the edge of the temple grounds, headlights dim, engine silent. The city's hum was gone. No distant cars, no barking dogs, no night insects. For a long moment, he couldn't tell if he was awake or dreaming. His body ached all over, his hands trembling, on the steering wheel. The clock on the dashboard blinked repeatedly, frozen at 0. He turned the key in the ignition. Nothing. The radio, still on from before, emitted only soft static. Then faintly, a woman's voice whispered through the noise. "Home!" The word barely rose above the hiss, drawn out and trembling, but it was enough to make his stomach twist. He turned the dial sharply, but the voice persisted, overlapping itself, echoing in whispers that sounded both close and impossibly far. "Home! Home!" Somchai's breath quickened. He glanced into the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty again, but a faint outline remained on the fabric. 2 dark, damp stains where someone had Saturday. The smell of incense was stronger now, mixed with something older, earthier, decay. He stumbled out of the car, slamming the door behind him. The temple loomed ahead, its gates open, faint candlelight flickering from somewhere within. He didn't know why, but his feet carried him forward. Each step on the gravel crunched louder than it should have. He passed the entrance shrine. The candles burned low, wax dripping down their sides. A bowl of wilted lotus flowers sat before a statue of a serene Buddha. Behind the statue, half hidden by shadow, was an old monk sweeping the steps. The rhythmic scrape of his broom was the only sound in the air. Somchai hesitated. "Excuse me," he said, his voice hoarse. "I think something's wrong. I was driving near the temple and—" The monk stopped sweeping. Slowly, he turned his head towards Somchai. His eyes were clouded with age, but sharp with awareness. He regarded the driver for a long, heavy moment before speaking. "You saw them, didn't you?" Somchai froze. "Who?" "The sisters," the monk said quietly. "You picked them up." He swallowed hard. "I thought they were people. They were just standing there. They didn't speak." The monk sighed, resting both hands on the broom handle. "They never speak. They don't need to. They are not of this world anymore." Somchai stepped closer. "Then why me? Why would they get into my car?" The monk's expression softened with a trace of pity. "They choose those who do not believe, those who think the stories are just tales. The sisters died here many years ago, decapitated by the last train that passed this temple's tracks before the line was shut down. They were on their way home from a night market, bringing food for their family. No one claimed their bodies. No proper rites were performed. Since then, they have been lost. Each year, around this time, they try to find their way back." Somchai's voice trembled. "So they appear to drivers?" The monk nodded slowly. "Yes. They remember the last moments of their lives standing by the road, waiting for a ride that would never come. To them, every passing car is a chance to relive their final journey. They get in and vanish when they reach the temple. To them, this is home. But to the living, that journey is not without cost." Somchai's throat tightened. "Cost?" The monk turned to face him fully now, his lined face illuminated by candlelight. "Anyone who carries them invites their sorrow. Some lose their way on the road. Some fall ill. Some hear the train for nights after, even in their sleep. The sisters are not cruel, they are lost. But their presence drains what is living, trying to make sense of what they no longer understand." Somchai took a step back, shaking his head. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." The monk lowered his gaze. "Few do. That is why we light incense at the gates each year, to guide them away. You should not have stopped. But now that you did, you must finish the journey they could not." Somchai blinked, confused. "Finish the journey? How?" The monk pointed toward the far end of the temple grounds. Beyond the wall lay the old train tracks overgrown with weeds, glinting faintly under the moonlight. Their spirits linger there. Bring them what they were carrying the night they died, an offering of food and light. It's the only way to let them rest." Somchai hesitated. "How do you know what they carried?" The monk's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Because I was there. I was a novice monk then. I saw them die." The air grew colder around them. The monk pressed a small packet into Somchai's trembling hands. 2 folded banana leaves containing sticky rice and a flickering candle. "Place it on the tracks," the monk whispered. "Light the candle and walk away. Do not look back." Somchai nodded, though his body felt numb. He followed the path around the temple, the distant hum of the phantom train echoing faintly in the night air. The tracks stretched before him, silver and silent. He knelt down, placing the offering on the ground. His fingers shook as he lit the candle. The small flame wavered weakly, casting a faint glow across the rusted metal. Then, just as the monk had warned, the sound began again, the low rumble of an approaching train. Somchai closed his eyes. The air pressed down on him, filled with wind and noise. The candle flickered violently. For a moment, he could hear them, two faint voices behind him, whispering softly, almost gratefully. "Thank you." And then, silence. He opened his eyes. The tracks were empty. The candle flame burned steady now, bright and calm. When he turned back toward the temple, the old monk was gone. Only the faint scent of incense lingered in the air, swirling gently before fading into the night. Somchai stood by the tracks for several minutes, watching the candle burn lower and lower until it was just a faint ember in the darkness. The night had grown still again, almost peaceful. The strange heaviness in the air had lifted, and for the first time in hours, he could breathe easily. He looked around, no mist, no chill, no phantom lights, just the distant hum of Bangkok returning to life somewhere beyond the horizon. He exhaled, trembling but relieved. It was over. Whatever curse or nightmare he had stumbled into was finally finished. He walked back to his taxi, the gravel crunching softly under his shoes. The car looked ordinary again, the windows clear, the headlights steady. When he opened the door, the faint scent of incense still lingered, but it was fading fast. He slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. It came to life on the first try. He almost smiled. He was exhausted, shaken, but alive. He checked the rearview mirror out of habit, nothing there but the empty back seat. For a brief moment, he let out a shaky laugh. "Just another Bangkok story," he whispered. "No one's ever going to believe this." The radio crackled softly. He reached to switch it off, but then froze. Through the static, a faint voice whispered a woman's voice, calm and familiar. "Home." His heart stopped. The engine sputtered once, then died completely. The lights went out, plunging the road into darkness. The only thing left was the low, distant sound of a train. He turned his head slowly toward the temple gates. There, standing by the roadside under the flickering streetlight, were two women dressed in black. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were fixed on him. Somchai's hands trembled on the wheel. And then, just as before, they raised their arms together and waved for a ride. The sound of the train grew louder, and the screen went black. The story of the women in black of Wat, Sami, and Nari reminds us that not all spirits find peace, and some return to repeat their final journey again and again. But restless souls aren't bound to the cities alone. Some haunt the deepest corners of Thailand's wilderness, far from temples, streetlights, and the safety of passing cars. Our next story takes us into the dark jungles of Aizen, where travelers whisper about something far older than any modern ghost, a creature that moves through the forest on a single leg, calling out in the night with a chilling voice that echoes through the trees. This is the legend of the Phai Kong Khoi, the one-legged jungle ghost that hunts those who dare to sleep too close to the ground. One story done, and 3 to go. I hope you like the stories so far. When I make these long videos, there are nights where I stay up really late working on them. Tomorrow, I will be uploading another video. If you don't want to miss it, please subscribe. It's free, and it would help my channel get some recognition for daily posting. Thank you. The Aizen jungle at night is a living thing. It breathes. It whispers. It watches. Crickets sing in uneven rhythms. Frogs croak in the flooded undergrowth, and the thick air feels almost alive, clinging to the skin like damp silk. Beneath the endless canopy, light barely reaches the forest floor. Even when the moon is full, the jungle seems to swallow it whole. It was into this suffocating darkness that Thanakorn found himself venturing. A 33-year-old wildlife photographer from Confronting, he had come to the forest in search of something beautiful rare footage of wild elephants migrating through the old logging trails near the Lao border. It was the kind of assignment that could make his career. He'd been hired by a nature magazine to document the untouched side of Eisen, the one most people never dared to enter after sunset. He had heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The locals warned him before he left the village at dusk. They told him not to camp directly on the ground, to keep his hammock high, to never follow any sound that called his name. One old man even pressed a small talisman into his hand, a piece of red cloth tied around a twig, blessed by a monk. "For the Fekong Koi," he said gravely. "It hunts those who sleep too low." Thanakorn smiled politely and promised he'd be careful. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in nature, in logic, in patterns he could capture through his camera lens. Ghost stories were folklore, beautiful but harmless. Still, when he looked into the old man's eyes, there was something there, a depth of sincerity that unsettled him more than the warning itself. By nightfall, Thanakorn had trekked deep into the forest, far beyond where the village lights could reach. His tent was set up near a small riverbank. The sound of rushing water filled the air, blending with the occasional rustle of unseen animals. Fireflies drifted lazily through the darkness like tiny floating lanterns. It should have been peaceful. It wasn't. The deeper the night grew, the heavier the silence became. The jungle, once alive with noise, seemed to dim as though holding its breath. Thanakorn sat by his small campfire, scrolling through the footage he'd captured that day: deer tracks, macaques, distant bird calls. He should have felt satisfied, but something about the forest unsettled him. He couldn't explain it, but every so often he felt the strange sensation of being observed. He tried to dismiss it as paranoia. He'd been alone too long, that's all. The night had a way of playing tricks on the mind. Still, when a branch snapped somewhere deep in the darkness, he found himself staring into the trees, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The beam revealed nothing but layers of tangled roots and glistening leaves. Then, the sound came again. A rhythmic thump, thump, thump. It wasn't the sound of footsteps. It was slower, uneven, like something hopping. Thanakorn froze. The air had shifted. The frogs had gone silent. Even the river seemed quieter. He listened carefully, heart pounding, waiting for the sound again. But all that followed was silence, deep and absolute. After a long minute, he exhaled, forcing a laugh. "Probably just a wild boar," he muttered to himself. "Or maybe a gibbon." He tossed another piece of wood into the fire, the flames crackling back to life. To shake off the unease, he grabbed his camera and took a few long exposure shots of the jungle, letting the lens capture what his eyes couldn't. When the shutter clicked for the final frame, he glanced at the preview screen. Something was there. Behind the faint outline of his tent, near the edge of the trees, was a shape. Small, thin, standing upright. He zoomed in. It was impossible to make out any details, just the faint blur of something humanoid, off balance, like it was standing on one leg. Thanakorn stared at the image for a long time, the sound of his heartbeat filling his ears. He told himself it was a trick of the light, a shadow, nothing more. But then, from somewhere deep within the jungle, a voice echoed soft, distant, and unmistakably human. "Koi, koi, koi." Thanakorn's blood ran cold. The sound was rhythmic, childlike, and horribly close. The voice came again, soft, rhythmic, and carried on the wind like a chant. Koi, koi, koi. Thanakorn froze, every muscle in his body tightening as the sound drifted through the jungle. It wasn't loud, if anything. It was distant, almost playful, but it echoed in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint where it came from. Sometimes it seemed ahead of him, deep in the forest. Other times it seemed to come from behind, from the riverbank. He turned off his flashlight instinctively, letting his eyes adjust to the faint orange glow of the campfire. The forest around him felt suddenly deeper, darker. Even the stars above seemed to fade behind the shifting branches. The night air grew heavy, pressing against his skin like wet fabric. He told himself it was nothing, probably a bird, or a monkey call warped by the echo of the trees. Jungle acoustics could be strange, deceptive. He'd read about it before, how even trained trackers sometimes couldn't tell direction in the dense canopy. Still, the chant had a rhythm too deliberate to be an animal. Koi. Koi. He swallowed hard and called out. Hello? Is someone there? The sound stopped instantly. Thanakorn's heart thudded. The silence that followed was suffocating. No crickets. No frogs. Just the faint crackle of the fire. Then footsteps. Slow, uneven. Thump, pause. Thump, pause. Something was moving just beyond the reach of the firelight. Thanakorn grabbed his flashlight again and aimed it toward the trees. The beam illuminated leaves, vines, shadows, but nothing else. He held his breath. The sound stopped the moment the light hit. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. The forest remained still. He lowered the flashlight slightly, and then something darted across the edge of the light. A quick, jerky motion, like a body hopping sideways. Thanakorn stumbled backward, his heart hammering in his chest. He could have sworn he saw something small, grayish, moving on a single leg before vanishing behind the nearest tree. He lifted his camera out of instinct and clicked the shutter. The flash burst briefly across the trees, a white explosion in the dark. When his vision cleared, the forest was empty again. He laughed nervously, though his voice cracked in the attempt. You're seeing things, man. It's the shadows. He checked the photo on his camera screen, zooming in carefully. Nothing but trees and smoke. But as he scrolled to the corner of the image, his stomach tightened. There was a shape, not clear, but faint like a smudge, half transparent, vaguely humanoid. It looked like something crouched low to the ground, facing the camera. Thanakorn turned the camera off. Enough, he muttered. Just sleep. He slung his hammock between two sturdy trees, tied the ropes high like the old man in the village had told him, and climbed in. The fire burned low beneath him, embers glowing faintly. He wrapped himself in his sleeping bag and tried to close his eyes. But sleep didn't come. The forest remained too quiet. The silence had a pulse to it, like the air itself was listening. Every small sound, every rustle, every whisper of wind felt amplified. Then, from somewhere near the river, came a soft splash. Thanakorn's eyes opened instantly. Another splash followed, heavier this time. He leaned over the side of his hammock, peering into the darkness below. The water shimmered faintly in the dying firelight, rippling outward. Then came the sound again. Koi, koi, koi. It was closer this time, almost right beneath him. Thanakorn's breath caught in his throat. He grabbed his flashlight again and shone it downward. The beam cut through the darkness, hitting the forest floor wet leaves, roots, empty space. And then he saw them. Footprints. Small, narrow, and deep. Not two, but one. a single line of imprints leading from the riverbank directly toward his campfire. He turned the light slightly. The prints ended right beneath his hammock. For a long moment, Thanakorn didn't move. The only sound was his own heartbeat, pounding in his ears. He lowered the light slowly, sweeping it across the trees again. Nothing. Just stillness. He forced a shaky laugh. Animals, he whispered to himself, though he couldn't think of any animal that hopped on one foot. He climbed back into the hammock, clutching his camera to his chest like a charm. Minutes passed. Then, gradually, the forest began to breathe again. The insects resumed their chorus. The river bubbled softly. The fire cracked. Maybe it was over. He let his eyes drift shut, exhaustion finally winning. But just as he began to fade into half-sleep, something brushed against his foot. A soft, wet touch. His eyes snapped open. He jerked his leg back, swinging in the hammock. He grabbed the flashlight and shone it down again. The ground below was empty. Then he saw at his toes, glistening with something dark. He wiped at it with his fingers. It was wet, sticky, blood. He stared at his foot in disbelief. There were no wounds, no cuts, just a faint, circular bruise forming near his big toe. The night went silent again, and from somewhere deep in the forest, that voice returned low, rhythmic, and almost satisfied. Koi, koi, koi. Thanakorn clutched his camera tight, his breathing shallow. He didn't dare move. He didn't dare answer. Because now, he finally understood what the villagers meant when they said, "Never sleep too close to the ground." Thanakorn stayed frozen in his hammock, clutching his flashlight with trembling hands. His foot still tingled where something had touched him, and the faint circular bruise on his skin seemed to darken with each passing minute. The jungle around him had gone quiet again, eerily quiet. Even the wind had stopped. The silence pressed in from all sides, thick and unnatural. He could hear his pulse, the rasp of his breath, and then somewhere beyond the fire something moved. It was subtle at first, a branch snapping, leaves shifting. Then came the unmistakable sound of hopping. Thump, pause, thump, pause. It wasn't random. It was steady, rhythmic. Moving closer, Thanakorn's light flickered as he swept it across the darkness. Every tree looked the same, every shadow too deep. The fire had nearly died now, its glow weak and orange, casting long, distorted shapes against the tent and the ground below. And then he saw eyes. Two small red orbs reflected the light from the dying fire, hovering low to the ground, just beyond the tree line. They blinked once too slowly to be animal and vanished. Thanakorn's heart thundered. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. No signal. The screen flickered between no service and emergency calls only. The time on the display froze at 3:07 a.m. He turned the flashlight off, hoping darkness might hide him. But that only made the other sounds clearer. The thump, pause, was closer now. He could hear breathing shallow, raspy, wet like something dragging air through water. Thanakorn's hand brushed against the camera beside him. Instinct took over. He turned it on, switched to video mode, and pressed record. The red indicator light blinked faintly in the dark. He aimed it toward the sound, holding his breath. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, from the shadows, something moved. It was fast, low to the ground. The lens caught a blur, pale, bony, and thin darting between the trees. The camera autofocused just in time to capture a shape hopping forward on one leg before the figure disappeared again. The sound of the hop echoed, followed by that dreadful chant. Koi, koi, koi. Thanakorn's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't distant anymore. It was right behind him. He turned sharply, swinging the flashlight toward the source, and the beam caught something leaning against his tent. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was small, hunched, and impossibly thin. Its single leg ended in a blackened stump that bent wrong like it had healed in a twisted angle. Its arms were long and veiny, its fingers reaching toward the ground. Thanakorn gasped and stumbled back in the hammock, sending it swinging wildly. The creature jerked its head upward at the sound, its face gray, its mouth too wide, teeth small and uneven. The red eyes blinked again. It whispered, "Koi," Thanakorn screamed. He grabbed his camera and flashlight, kicking at the ground as he leapt out of the hammock. The moment his feet hit the dirt, he bolted toward the trail that led back to the village. Branches clawed at his arms and face. The ground was slick with mud. Behind him, that uneven hopping sound followed relentlessly. Thump, pause, thump, pause. He didn't dare look back. After several minutes of running, he saw a faint light ahead, an oil lantern swaying in the darkness. Relief surged through him. A small wooden hut stood by the trail, half collapsed, its door barely hanging by one hinge. He rushed toward it, gasping for breath. An old man sat on the porch, holding the lantern. His face was lined and tired, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't look surprised to see Thanakorn. "You shouldn't be here at night," the man said softly. "Not during the ghost season." Thanakorn doubled over, panting. "There's something out there. One leg, it's following me." The old man stood slowly, shaking his head. "Phi Kong Koi," he said. "I told your kind before. The forest doesn't forgive those who sleep too close to the earth." Thanakorn stared at him, confused and terrified. "I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a story." The man's expression hardened. "Belief doesn't matter. You heard it call your name?" Thanakorn hesitated. It said something. "Koi." The old man's hand tightened on the lantern. "Then it's marked you. You must not answer when it calls again. And you must not let it touch your feet a second time. If it feeds twice, your soul is its own." Before Thanakorn could respond, the jungle behind them erupted with noise, the snapping of branches, the thumping of uneven steps. The old man's eyes widened. "It's already here," he whispered. He pushed Thanakorn toward the hut. "Go inside. Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." Thanakorn stumbled in, slamming the door shut. Through the gaps in the wood, he could see the faint red light of the lantern flickering outside. Then came the sound again. Koi, 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 and then silence. A moment later, something heavy hit the door. The wood shook. The lantern outside fell, its light extinguished. Thanakorn pressed his back to the wall, shaking violently, the camera still clutched in his hands. The screen showed a faint reflection of his terrified face until something else appeared behind him in the lens. 2 small glowing red eyes. Thanakorn's breathing came in ragged bursts. The hut was pitch dark now, save for the faint blue glow of his camera screen. He stared at the reflection in disbelief. 2 small red orbs hovering just behind his shoulder. Slowly, trembling, he turned his head. Nothing. Just the damp, rotting walls of the cabin. The silence was unbearable. Even the jungle outside seemed to have died. Then came a sound, a soft scraping, like nails dragging across the wood. It started near the back wall, slow and deliberate, moving upward. The boards creaked as if something was crawling along the outside of the hut. Thanakorn backed into the farthest corner, gripping his camera like a weapon. "Who's there?" he whispered, though his voice barely made a sound. No reply. only the faint whisper of breath through the cracks in the wood. Then, 3 soft knocks on the door. Thump, pause, thump, pause, thump. Thanakorn's throat went dry. His mind raced back to the old man's warning. Don't open the door. Don't answer when it calls. He stayed completely still. After a few seconds, the knocking stopped. Silence stretched on for what felt like minutes. Then, from directly behind him, a voice spoke quiet, childlike, inches from his ear. "Koi! Koi!" Thanakorn screamed and spun around. The beam of his flashlight flickered wildly across the small room. There was no one there, only the tattered remains of an old hammock, some broken tools, and walls coated with moss. But the smell in the air had changed. It was metallic, sour, like rusted blood. He fumbled with the camera, switching it to night mode. The infrared screen flickered, filling the room with a ghostly green tint. That's when he saw it. A shadow crouched in the far corner of the room, low to the ground, its body small and thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It wasn't standing, it was balanced on one leg, its other limb folded behind it like something broken. The creature's face was hidden beneath tangled black hair, but through the strands, faint red eyes glowed. Thanakorn froze, unable to move. The figure didn't lunge. It didn't attack. It just watched him. Then it began to move, not walking, but hopping, slow and deliberate. Each time it landed, the entire hut trembled. Koi, koi, koi. The sound wasn't coming from its mouth. It was coming from everywhere. From the floorboards, the walls, even the air itself. Thanakorn stumbled backward, knocking over a wooden stool. He tripped and fell hard against the door, his camera flying from his hand. It hit the ground but kept recording, the red light blinking weakly. He looked up. The creature was gone. Then, the old man's voice cut through the darkness from outside, muffled but urgent. "Don't look at it!" Thanakorn froze. "Help me!" he shouted. "What is it?" "Keep your eyes down. It feeds through sight." He squeezed his eyes shut, pressing his palms against them. He could hear movement, the scraping of wood, the thudding of uneven steps, the faint sound of breathing right beside him. "Please," he whispered. "Please, stop." The sound moved closer. Then, a faint wet pressure brushed against his ankle. He jerked, but something icy and strong held him still. A deep numbness spread up his leg. "No!" he gasped, opening his eyes in panic. The creature was crouched inches from him now, its face fully visible. Its skin was pale and drawn tight over its bones. The mouth was stretched wide into a crooked grin, lips cracked and bleeding. Its eyes were bright red and wet, like 2 open wounds. "Koi!" it whispered again. And then it leaned forward, pressing its face toward his feet. Thanakorn screamed and kicked violently. The creature vanished into thin air, the air around him erupting into a burst of freezing wind. The walls groaned, the door slammed open, and the jungle light spilled in dim gray, the faintest hint of dawn breaking. He stumbled outside, gasping, falling onto the dirt. The hut behind him creaked loudly, the old man nowhere to be seen. Only his lantern lay on the ground, still flickering faintly. Thanakorn looked down at his foot. Blood. Again. The same circular bruise, darker now, like it had been burned into his skin. The jungle was utterly still. Then footsteps. He turned. The old man emerged from behind the trees, limping, his face pale and drawn. "You shouldn't have looked," he said softly, voice breaking. "It knows you now." Thanakorn shook his head, trembling. "What is it?" The old man's gaze flicked toward the forest. A spirit left hungry. A soldier's curse. Long ago, men were buried in these woods without feet, so their ghosts could not walk home. Some learned to hop. Thanakorn stared at him, horrified. "Can I stop it?" The old man shook his head. "You can run, but if you sleep again on the earth, it will find you." The jungle wind shifted, carrying with it that distant, rhythmic echo once more. Koi, koi, koi. The sound rippled through the trees, slow and patient, as if mocking the sunrise. Thanakorn tightened his grip on his camera, his pulse pounding in his ears. He realized then this wasn't a hunt, it was a ritual. And now he was part of it. The first rays of dawn bled weakly through the jungle canopy, casting thin stripes of gray light across the clearing. Thanakorn sat slumped against a tree, his body trembling with exhaustion. His camera hung limply from his neck, its lens cracked, the battery indicator blinking red. Every part of him ached. He could still feel the cold touch on his ankle, the strange pulsing bruise that seemed to throb in rhythm with his heartbeat. The old man stood a few feet away, staring toward the tree line. His lantern had gone out, but he didn't seem to need it anymore. His face was drawn, eyes heavy with something that looked like regret. "You're lucky to be breathing," he said softly. "Most who meet the Faikong Koi don't see the morning." Thanakorn swallowed hard. "What was that thing?" he whispered. "What does it want?" The old man didn't answer right away. He crouched down beside the faint trail of footprints, those same single, one-legged marks leading from the forest toward the hut. His fingers hovered over the prints, as though afraid to touch them. "It's not one thing," he said finally. "It's many. Fragments of those who died in the forest, soldiers, hunters, wanderers, all left without rest." Thanakorn frowned, trying to make sense of it. "Soldiers?" The old man nodded. "During the wars, men marched through these jungles. Some never returned. Many were buried without the proper rites, limbs missing, bodies scattered by the fighting. Their spirits were broken, unable to find their way home. The villagers said they began to change. The body rotted, but the hunger remained." He looked up, his voice low and careful. "The Faikong Koi feeds not on flesh, but on what keeps a man alive, his essence, his warmth, his blood." Thanakorn's hands clenched. "That's why it touched my foot." "Yes," the old man said. "It takes the heat from the body through the blood, always through the feet. That is why we hang our hammocks high, to keep our souls from the ground, where the hungry ones wait." Thanakorn stared at his bruised ankle, the realization sinking in. So that's what all the stories meant. The bruises, the toe marks. The old man's expression darkened. "It's more than stories. Once it marks you, it follows. It's not bound to one place. You can leave this forest, but it will walk behind you, hopping, calling your name when you sleep." Thanakorn's stomach twisted. "How do I stop it?" The man hesitated, glancing back toward the hut. "You can't kill what's already dead, but there's one thing you can do. You must give it what it wants, most peace. You must find where it died, and let it finish its journey." Thanakorn frowned. "How am I supposed to find where something like that died?" The old man stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. "You'll know. When it calls again, don't run from it. Follow the sound. It will lead you there." Thanakorn stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to follow it? After what it did?" The man met his gaze. "There's no other way. If you don't, you'll never escape it. It doesn't kill out of anger, it kills out of confusion. It doesn't understand that it's dead. All it remembers is the last thing it did before dying hopping through the jungle, calling for help that never came." The jungle wind shifted then, cold and damp. Somewhere deep within the trees, that soft, rhythmic call echoed again. Koi, koi, koi. Thanakorn froze. The sound was distant, mournful, almost pitiful now. The old man took a step back. Go, now, before it loses its reason again. Thanakorn hesitated only a moment before forcing himself to move. He followed the faint sound through the underbrush, every step making his heart hammer faster. The jungle seemed to part before him, as though guiding him somewhere it remembered too well. The further he went, the colder it became. The light dimmed, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and rust. Then, through the trees, he saw a shallow depression in the ground, half covered in vines. Rusted fragments of metal poked through the soil. A boot, a helmet, and a single, skeletal leg. Thanakorn's breath caught in his throat. He knelt beside the remains, realizing this was no random grave. The bones were bound together by a faded cloth strap, like the remnants of an old field dressing. The leg had been torn clean from the rest of the body, and beside it, faintly etched into the dirt, was a mark, a circle. He reached into his bag with shaking hands and pulled out his lighter. He lit a stick of incense he'd taken from the temple days before. The smoke curled upward, faint and white, spiraling into the canopy. I'm sorry, he whispered, for whatever happened to you, for being afraid. The jungle wind picked up again, swirling the smoke in a tight spiral. The sound returned closer now, but softer. Koi, koi. Thanakorn turned slowly. The figure stood a few meters away, half translucent in the morning light. Its one leg no longer bled. Its body shimmered faintly like mist. The red glow in its eyes was fading, replaced by something hollow, empty. It didn't move toward him this time. It only watched. Thanakorn bowed his head. You can rest now, he whispered. The figure tilted its head, as though listening. Then, with a faint exhale, it vanished its shape, dissolving into the rising smoke. The jungle fell quiet again. For the first time since entering it, Thanakorn felt warmth on his skin. The light was stronger now. Birds began to sing in the distance. He stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where the spirit had been. Then he lifted his camera and took one final picture. When he checked the image, there was nothing but a streak of white mist curling above the grave, almost like a leg rising toward the sky. Thanakorn emerged from the jungle, just as the morning sun began to burn through the mist. The village roofs shimmered in the distance, their tin panels reflecting pale gold. Each step felt heavier than the last. His body was weak, but his mind even more so, caught between relief and disbelief. He had survived the night. He had seen the impossible. When he reached the dirt road leading back to town, a few early risers stared as he passed. Mud covered his clothes, his camera strap was torn, and his eyes looked hollow. One woman, selling rice at her stall, crossed herself silently and whispered a prayer. Thanakorn didn't stop. He walked until he reached the guest house where he had left his motorcycle. The receptionist looked up in shock. You were in the forest? She asked, softly. People said they heard the koi last night. He didn't answer. He only asked for water and a place to sit. Later that afternoon, he reviewed the footage from his camera. Most of it was blurred or overexposed, but one clip, taken inside the hut, remained clear. He hesitated before pressing play. The image showed him sleeping in the hammock, his face calm, the fire still burning low. Then, from the edge of the frame, a pale figure appeared small, hunched, moving slowly on one leg. It hovered beside him, leaning close. And though its mouth never moved, the audio picked up a faint whisper. Koi, Koi. Thanakorn slammed the laptop shut, his pulse spiking. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. It was over. He had done the ritual, freed the spirit. That was what the old man had said. But then his phone buzzed. A notification. The camera app had automatically uploaded the footage to cloud storage. The message read, "New device signed in from another location." He frowned. There was no signal here, no internet. Then, from behind him, a soft voice echoed through the empty room. "Koi! Koi! Koi!" The screen went black. Bangkok after midnight is a strange place. The streets hum with the last traces of traffic. Neon signs flicker like dying stars, and the air feels thick-heavy with the weight of 1,000 untold stories. It's a city that never truly sleeps, yet in certain corners, silence hangs like a curtain. One of those places was the Ratchada Tower, an aging apartment complex tucked between two newer buildings, almost swallowed by the modern skyline. It was here that Nok, a 29-year-old nurse, moved after transferring to a nearby hospital. The rent was cheap, suspiciously cheap, but the location was perfect walking distance to work, close to the night markets, and away from her overbearing relatives who thought she worked too hard. The building itself looked ordinary enough from the outside. A cracked marble entrance, an old elevator that groaned with every trip, and fluorescent hallway lights that buzzed faintly like angry insects. But something about Ratchada Tower felt wrong the moment she arrived. The lobby smelled faintly of incense, even though no one seemed to burn it. The security guard, a quiet man in his 50s, handed her the keys without making eye contact. "Room 604, he muttered, sliding the key across the counter. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "If you hear crying at night, don't open your door." Nok blinked. "Crying?" The guard just shook his head. "This building, it remembers things." She tried to laugh it off as superstition. Bangkok was full of ghost stories. Half the hospitals she'd worked in had their own. But still, that first night, as she rode the elevator up, the air inside the lift felt oddly cold, despite the summer heat. When the doors opened onto the 6th floor, her reflection flickered briefly in the metal walls, as if the lights hesitated to keep her company. Room 604 was small but clean. White walls, a single window overlooking the expressway, and a mirror mounted on the wardrobe door. She unpacked in silence, the city lights outside flashing through the blinds. Everything seemed fine until she noticed the faint smell of perfume, sweet, floral, and out of place. She searched her bag, the bathroom, even the hallway. Nothing. Yet every few minutes, the scent returned, drifting through the air like someone had just walked past her. By midnight, she had convinced herself it was left over from the last tenant. She turned off the light, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above her. The noise of the city filtered faintly through the window car horns, laughter, the occasional barking dog. Then, gradually, the sounds faded. Somewhere beyond her door, a faint sobbing began. It was soft at first, like someone trying not to be heard. Nok sat up slowly, holding her breath. The crying grew louder, echoing down. The hall fragile, heartbroken, unmistakably female. She hesitated, staring at the door. The security guard's words echoed in her mind. "If you hear crying at night, don't open your door." But she was a nurse. She'd comforted dying patients, handled night shifts in wards that felt colder than graveyards. What kind of person ignored someone crying for help? She stood, quietly across the room, and pressed her ear to the door. The sobbing stopped. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks. Nok's body went rigid. She stared at the handle, her heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every other sound. The knocks came again, softer this time. She whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. The air inside the room felt thicker now, as if something unseen had moved closer. The perfume returned stronger this time, mixing with the faint scent of something else underneath. Iron. Blood. Knox stumbled back toward her bed, her eyes darting toward the mirror by the wardrobe. For a second, just one brief second, she thought she saw movement in the reflection. A pale figure standing behind her, head bowed, long dark hair falling across its face. She spun around. Nothing there. But when she looked back at the mirror, the reflection was still watching her. Knock couldn't move. Her reflection in the wardrobe mirror stared back at her, pale and still. But there was something wrong, something subtly off. The angle of the reflection didn't match her own. In the glass, her head was tilted slightly to the side, just enough to look unnatural, and the eyes, her reflection's eyes, looked darker, hollow. She blinked hard, trying to shake the illusion. When she looked again, the reflection had returned to normal. Just her. Just a tired woman alone in a cheap Bangkok apartment. She exhaled slowly and sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to steady her breathing. "You're exhausted," she whispered to herself. "It's just lack of sleep." The city outside murmured faintly. Through the window, distant engines, the rumble of the sky train, the hum of neon signs. It grounded her, reminded her that she wasn't alone in the world. Not really. Still, she avoided looking back at the mirror. She didn't like the way it seemed to pull at the corner of her vision. Eventually, she managed to lie down again. The crying had stopped, and the hallway was quiet. The air conditioner hummed softly above her. For a few moments, she began to drift off. Then click, her eyes shot open. The bathroom light was on. Knox stared at the closed door, her body tense. She hadn't touched the switch since unpacking. She waited, her heart hammering. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly from inside, rhythmic and deliberate. She stood slowly, bare feet pressing against the cold floor. The smell of perfume returned, thick and suffocating, now sweet jasmine, but tainted somehow, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. She reached for the bathroom handle and turned it slowly. The light inside flickered. The sink tap was running. She stepped closer and turned it off, staring at her trembling reflection in the mirror above it. For a brief second, she thought she saw another shape standing behind her in the glass. A woman, shoulders slumped, head hanging low, but when she spun around, the room was empty. Her hands shook as she shut off the light and closed the door. Sleep was out of the question now. She wrapped a shawl around herself and sat by the window, staring out at the glow of the city. Somewhere down below, a motorcycle roared past, followed by laughter. It was strange how comfortless those familiar sounds felt tonight. At around 2:30 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message from her colleague, Orn, appeared on the screen. "Orn, you moved into Ratchada Tower, right?" "Noke, yes." "Why?" "Orn, that place is cursed. One of our nurses lived there before. She saw things. She moved out after a week." "Noke, please don't start. I've had a long day." Orn, serious. "Room 604? Knock froze. Knock, how do you know?" Orn, "That's the one she stayed in. The crying woman. The one who died giving birth. People say she never left that room." Knock's stomach dropped. "You're just trying to scare me," she whispered to herself, though her voice lacked conviction. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. The shadows seemed thicker now, creeping into corners that had looked harmless an hour ago. She stood up and turned on every light she could find. That's when she noticed it. The mirror on the wardrobe door had fogged slightly, as though someone had breathed on it. She stepped closer, squinting. Words had been drawn across the misted surface, faint but legible. "Why did you take my room?" Nox stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her throat. She blinked hard, and when she looked again, the message was gone. The mirror was clear. A loud bang echoed from the hallway outside, followed by hurried footsteps. She ran to the door, pressing her ear against it. Someone was running up the stairs. Then came a woman's scream, short, sharp, and cut off mid-breath. Nock yanked open the door, her instincts as a nurse overriding her fear. The hallway stretched out under flickering fluorescent lights. It was empty. "Hello?" she called out. "Is anyone there?" No answer. A door at the far end of the corridor creaked open just slightly, then slammed shut again on its own. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Nock's pulse thundered in her ears. She backed away from the hall and shut her own door quickly, locking it. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the key. The air in her apartment felt colder now, like the air conditioner had turned itself to full blast. She turned it off, but the chill remained. Then came the crying again. This time, it wasn't outside. It was inside the apartment. It started faint, near the window. Then it moved, slowly, across the room. The sound was unmistakably human. A woman weeping softly, almost whispering between sobs. Nock's eyes darted toward the wardrobe. The mirror was fogging again, faint shapes forming behind the glass. She whispered, "Please, stop." The crying grew louder, almost desperate. The wardrobe door trembled as if someone were pushing against it from the inside. Nock grabbed her phone with trembling hands and tried to turn on the flashlight. The screen flickered once, then died. In the darkness, something whispered back. A voice, soft, wet, and broken right beside her ear. "Give me back, my child." Nock's scream caught in her throat. The voice was so close it felt like it had brushed her skin. She stumbled backward, knocking over the chair by her bedside. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The room looked normal again. Too normal. But the scent of jasmine was overwhelming now, as if someone had spilled perfume across the air itself. Her phone came back to life suddenly, the flashlight blinking for half a second before the screen lit up. A flood of new messages appeared, missed calls, unread texts, all from Orn. Orn. "Nock, are you okay?" Orn. "Don't stay there tonight." Orn. "The monk said the spirit in that building is a Phi Tai Hong Klom. It's dangerous." Orn. "It wants something back." Nock's hands trembled as she typed. "What does it want?" The reply came instantly. "Her child." Before she could respond, the air conditioning unit rattled loudly, the noise echoing through the room like a sudden growl. The lights dimmed, and from the mirror's reflection, Nock saw something move across the floor behind her, slow, deliberate, dragging. She turned sharply. Nothing. Her breathing came fast and shallow. She knew she needed to get out. She grabbed her bag, her phone, and her keys, then yanked open the door. The hallway beyond was empty, except for the faint hum of the flickering fluorescent lights. As she stepped out, the security guard from the lobby appeared at the far end of the corridor. His face was pale, his uniform slightly disheveled. "Miss Nock," he said softly, walking toward her. "You shouldn't be out here." "I can't stay in that room," she said, her voice shaking. "There's someone, something, inside." He looked at her for a long moment before sighing. "It's the woman," he said finally, "the one who died here. We told the owner to close the floor, but they never listen. Too much money in rent." "What happened to her?" Nock asked. The guard's eyes darted to the ceiling, as if afraid the walls could hear him. "She died during childbirth. alone. The baby died too. They say she didn't even know she was gone. She still wanders the building looking for her child. That's why the monks call her Phi Tai Hong Klom, twice cursed, death by tragedy, and death with a child still inside her. Nok swallowed hard, her pulse hammering. Why 604? That was her room. Before Nok could reply, the elevator doors at the far end of the hall opened with a low ding. They both turned. No one was inside. The guard frowned. I didn't call it. The doors stayed open longer than they should have. A faint sound drifted from within like someone whispering. Then, slowly, a hand reached out. Pale, thin, trembling. It pressed against the doorframe, followed by the faint scrape of fingernails against metal. The guard stepped in front of Nok. "Go back!" he barked. "Don't look at it!" But she couldn't move. Her eyes were locked on the elevator. The hand withdrew slowly into the shadows. The whispering stopped. Then, the elevator lights went out. The guard fumbled for his amulet and muttered a prayer under his breath. "I told them this place needs a proper ritual," he said quickly. "Monks came last year, but they only chanted outside. She's still trapped inside this building." Nok tried to steady her voice. "How do we help her?" He shook his head. "We can't. She doesn't want help. She wants what she lost." The elevator let out another ding, this time from the floor below, then the one above. The sound bounced between levels, echoing like something climbing through the building. Nok's phone buzzed again. She glanced down and froze. The screen had opened the camera app by itself. It was recording. She lifted it slowly. The camera lens faced the hallway. For a second, nothing appeared then. A shape flickered into view at the far end. A woman in a hospital gown, her hair hanging wet and heavy over her face. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Nok gasped and dropped the phone. The image vanished, but the crying returned louder now, filling every corner of the hallway. The guard's amulet snapped from its chain, hitting the ground with a metallic clang. He cursed under his breath. "Go downstairs, now, to the spirit house by the parking lot. Don't stop until you're there." Nok ran. The stairwell lights flickered as she descended, each step echoing in the narrow space. She could hear it, following soft, uneven footsteps that didn't sound human. Every few seconds, a whisper brushed her ear. "Where is my baby?" By the time she reached the ground floor, the crying had turned to wailing. The entire building seemed to shake with it. She stumbled out into the humid night air, gasping for breath, turning toward the small spirit house near the gate. Candles burned weakly there, flickering in the wind. She dropped to her knees before it, whispering prayers she barely remembered from childhood. Behind her, the glass doors of Ratchata Tower trembled. A faint reflection appeared in the lobby window, a woman standing just inside, her face pressed against the glass, eyes dark and hollow. She was still watching. The candles at the spirit house guttered in the wind, their flames bending violently, as if struggling to stay alive. Nok's trembling hands pressed together in prayer, the scent of melted wax and incense mixing with the humid air. She could still hear the echo of crying from the building behind her, seeping through the walls like a heartbeat. The security guard came running down the path moments later, his flashlight flickering weakly in his hand. Sweat glistened on his forehead, and his voice shook as he spoke. "She's awake again. The monk's protection, it's wearing off." Nok turned to him, her voice barely holding steady. "What do you mean, awake again?" "She doesn't appear every night," he said, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the glass doors. "Only when something disturbs her room, when someone new moves in, when the crying starts." Nok's stomach twisted. "I didn't do anything. I just moved in. I didn't even know." He shook his head. You opened the door when you heard her. That's enough. You acknowledged her. Now she knows you. Before Nock could respond, a deafening bang came from inside the lobby. The glass doors shook in their frames. One of them cracked clean down the center with a sound like breaking bone. The air around them dropped several degrees. The guard's flashlight dimmed, its beams struggling against the encroaching darkness. Then, slowly, the crying began again, faint but deliberate. It echoed from the elevator shaft, rising and falling like a chant. Nock whispered, "We have to leave. We can't stay here." The guard didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something behind her. She turned. Through the glass, the lobby lights flickered, revealing a figure standing by the elevator. It was a woman, tall, thin, dressed in a stained hospital gown. Her head hung low, hair falling across her face, her bare feet leaving streaks of water on the tile. The elevator doors opened behind her, light spilling out, but she didn't step in. She just stood there, head tilted slightly to the side, listening. Then she began to move. Her first step was slow, the second faster, and then she was gliding forward, not walking but dragging, her legs trailing behind her as if they didn't fully belong to her body. The lights in the lobby exploded, plunging everything into darkness. The guard grabbed Nock's wrist. "Run!" They bolted toward the parking lot, their footsteps echoing through the night. Behind them came the unmistakable sound of glass shattering, followed by that wailing cry, louder than before, no longer sorrowful but enraged. When they reached the far edge of the lot, the guard stopped abruptly, turning toward the small temple shrine near the perimeter wall. "We have to get inside," he said, fumbling for the keys hanging from his belt. His hands shook so violently that the keys jingled like chimes. "The abbot, he keeps holy water inside. It can stop her." Nock nodded, but as she looked back, her breath caught in her throat. The ghost had followed them. She was outside now, standing under the fluorescent parking light. Her skin was pale blue, veins visible through the thin membrane. Her hospital gown clung to her like wet paper, and her face, no longer obscured, was twisted with agony. One side of her head was bruised, her lips cracked, and her eyes dark and sunken. In her arms, she carried something small, bundled in a blood-stained towel. A baby. Except there was no movement, no sound, just the faint image of tiny feet dangling from the cloth. Nock stumbled backward, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh my God!" The woman's eyes lifted slowly, locking onto hers. Her lips parted, trembling. "Help me," the ghost said. Her voice was hoarse, wet, raw with grief. The guard shouted a chant, his voice breaking. "Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa." He splashed a few drops of water from a small plastic bottle toward the spirit. The woman shrieked. The sound tore through the air like ripping metal. The light above them shattered, plunging everything into near darkness. The ground beneath Nock's feet trembled. Then, as the echo faded, Nock saw her clearly for the first time. The bundle in the spirit's arms wasn't a baby. It was nothing but a tangle of cloth, empty, soaked in blood. The ghost's face twisted with fury, her voice breaking into a sob. "They took him. They buried him without me." Nock's heart hammered. "Who?" she whispered. The spirit turned her head sharply toward the building. "They took him from me. They said I couldn't keep him." The wind howled suddenly, ripping leaves from the trees, sending the candles at the spirit house spinning out. The ghost's voice rose above the chaos. "They said I wasn't fit to be a mother. They took him before he breathed." The guard's voice cracked. "Phi Tai Hong Klom, the unborn child. She doesn't know she's dead." The ghost's eyes darted between them, confusion and pain warping her face. "He's crying. Can't you hear him?" And for the briefest moment, Nock did hear it, a faint, high-pitched cry, like a baby gasping for breath. The sound came from the bundle in the ghost's arms. Nock's instinct took over. Against every warning, every shred of reason, she stepped forward. "Please," she said softly. "He's safe now. You can rest." The ghost's head twitched. The crying stopped. Her eyes seemed to soften for a fraction of a second. Then she looked past Nock toward the security guard. Her expression darkened. He was one of them. Before Nock could react, the ghost lunged forward, moving with terrifying speed. The air turned icy as she passed through the guard. His body convulsed violently before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Nock screamed. The spirit stopped just inches from her, face contorted in rage and grief. Then she whispered, "Bring him back to me," and vanished into thin air, leaving only the sound of a baby's faint cry echoing through the night. The air was still vibrating from the scream when silence fell over the parking lot. Nock stood frozen beside the security guard's body, her mind blank, her throat too tight to even call for help. The fluorescent light above flickered weakly, illuminating his face, eyes open, mouth slack, a faint burn mark across his chest where the spirit had passed through him. His amulet, once hanging proudly around his neck, had turned black. Nock's hands trembled as she crouched beside him. She pressed her fingers against his neck. No pulse. The reality of it hit her like a shock wave. He was dead. The ghost hadn't just scared him. She had taken him. Nock stumbled back, breathing hard, her vision swimming. Her phone buzzed weakly in her hand. It was Orn again. She answered immediately, her voice shaking. "Orn, please, I don't know what to do. She killed him. She killed him." Orn's voice came through, strained and urgent. "Listen to me. You have to leave that place. The monks who blessed the building, they said she can't cross the temple grounds nearby. If you get there, you'll be safe." "She said something," Nock whispered. "She said they took her baby, that he was buried without her." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Orn spoke quietly, as though piecing something together. "That must be true. There's an old story about that building from before it was rebuilt. The original site used to be a clinic. They said a young woman died there giving birth alone, and the doctor he disposed of the baby's body to cover up the accident. No rites, no name, nothing. She died, screaming, cursing everyone inside. Nock's knees went weak. So the baby's body. Never found, Orn said. The owner paved over the site and turned it into apartments. They thought the chanting would silence her, but it only trapped her there. Nock felt cold all over. The scent of jasmine drifted back on the wind, faint but unmistakable. She turned toward the building. The lights in the hallway on the 6th floor were flickering again, one by one, like a trail of signals. "She wants it back," Nock whispered. "Her child." Orn's voice wavered. "Nock, don't." But Nock had already started moving. The streets were empty as she crossed the parking lot, her shoes echoing against the pavement. The elevator was dead, so she took the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Her heart hammered in her ears. The crying had returned, drifting faintly through the stairwell. Koi! Koi! No, not koi. She realized it now. The sound wasn't nonsense. It was koi, the Thai word for please. Koi, 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 please. By the time she reached the 6th floor, the crying had changed. It was softer now, like a lullaby half remembered. The smell of blood and perfume filled the corridor. Her room door, 604, was open. Inside, the lights were dim, the air heavy with humidity. The mirror on the wardrobe shimmered faintly, fogged over from the inside. Nock stepped closer, her reflection warping as though the glass were rippling. "Where are you?" she whispered. The reflection blinked, but she hadn't. The figure in the mirror raised its head slowly, revealing a bruised, pale face, the woman from the elevator. Her dark hair clung to her skin. "You took my room," the ghost said softly. "You heard me cry," Nock swallowed, forcing the words out. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. I want to help you." The spirit tilted her head. "Help?" Nock nodded, tears streaking her face. "You said they took your baby. If I find him, if I find where they buried him, will you rest?" The spirit's expression twisted with anguish. "He's near. I can hear him." The lights flickered. The floor beneath Nock's feet seemed to pulse, as if the entire building were breathing. Then she heard it faint, but real, a soft, distant cry echoing through the vents. She turned toward the bathroom. The crying grew louder as she approached, becoming high-pitched, urgent. The scent of rot filled the air. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the doorknob. The light flicked on. The bathtub was full not with water, but with dark, muddy soil. The walls were streaked with handprints, and half buried in the dirt was something wrapped in a faded hospital cloth. Nock gasped and covered her mouth. The bundle was small, tiny. The ghost appeared behind her reflection in the mirror, face trembling with grief. "He's here," she whispered. "They hid him from me." Nock's vision blurred with tears. "Then you can rest now. You can both rest." The spirit stepped forward, half translucent, reaching for the bathtub. Her hands trembled as she lifted the bundle. The crying stopped. The air seemed to still, heavy with sorrow. Then, slowly, she turned to Nock. "They made me a monster," she said, her voice barely a breath. "I only wanted him." The mirror shattered. Glass rained down around them, each shard reflecting fragments of the ghost's face. Sorrow, rage, relief. Nock shielded herself, the noise ringing in her ears. When she looked up again, the woman was gone. The bathtub was empty. The air was still. A faint breeze drifted through the apartment, carrying with it the scent of incense. Not jasmine now, but sandalwood, the kind used in temple prayers. Nock sank to her knees, trembling. It was over. The crying had stopped, or so she thought. From the corner of the room came the soft creak of the wardrobe door. It opened just slightly, revealing the faintest movement inside. A baby's toy, old, dusty, and long forgotten, rolled gently out across the floor. Nock stared at the small toy as it rolled to a stop at her feet. It was a wooden rattle, painted red and white, the color long faded. Its handle cracked down the middle. A faint jingling came from inside, though the air around her was still. Her body felt weightless, every sound muted except the rhythmic pounding of her heart. She looked toward the bathroom. The bathtub was empty now, the soil gone. The mirror, shattered, but on the tiles, faint footprints had appeared. Small ones, bare. Leading out toward the living room, she followed them slowly, her throat dry. Each step brought a soft creak from the floorboards, as if the building itself were listening. The footprints stopped in front of the window. Outside, the city was waking traffic, murmuring far below, the glow of dawn just brushing the skyline. Everything looked normal, but inside, the air felt colder than before, dense and heavy, as though something unseen lingered just beyond sight. Then, from behind her, came the soft, unmistakable sound of breathing. She turned. The wardrobe door was wide open now. Inside hung her clothes neat, Untouched, but between the hangers, a figure stood half in shadow. It was the woman. Her eyes were calm now, her face no longer twisted in grief. In her arms, she held the same bundle as before, though this time the cloth was clean, white. Nock took a small step back, her voice trembling. "You found him." The woman smiled faintly. "He's quiet now." For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Then, the baby's rattle jingled once more and fell from the ghost's hand, hitting the floor with a dull clack. The woman's smile faded, her eyes lifted toward Nock. "But he's still hungry." The lights went out. When the neighbors found the apartment the next morning, the door was locked from the inside. The bed was untouched, the phone on the floor, and the only thing out of place was a single red rattle lying in the center of the room, its handle warm, as if someone had just been holding it. The ghost of the Phi Tai Hong showed us that not all spirits rest, and some are trapped in endless grief. But in other parts of Thailand, darkness takes on a different form, one that walks, hunts, and kills. Where the city's ghosts cling to sorrow, the countryside hides something older, something primal. Our next story comes from the remote jungles of Gruang Dong, where villagers whisper about a creature born from death and rage. They say it is neither man nor beast, but a fusion of both a tiger, cursed to carry the souls of those it has devoured. Hunters who enter its territory often vanish, and those who return speak of glowing eyes and laughter that isn't human. This is the legend of the demon tiger of Gruang Dong, the Siar Saming. The jungle around Gruang Dong was alive, but not with the kind of life that comforted travelers. The trees were ancient, their roots like gnarled hands reaching across the dirt, and the air was thick, so heavy with heat and the smell of rot that every breath felt stolen. Insects hummed from every direction, a constant, chaotic symphony. And somewhere deep within that noise, something else moved, something larger, Pran. Thou adjusted his rifle and scanned the tree line. He had hunted these jungles his entire life, but this time felt different. The silence that followed each step didn't feel natural. It was expectant, like the forest itself was holding its breath. He wasn't here for sport. He was here for revenge. 2 weeks earlier, his younger brother had been found near the edge of the village, his body mauled, his ribs crushed, half his face missing. The villagers said it was a tiger attack, but the wounds told another story. The bite marks were too uneven, too human. His brother's eyes were wide open, as if he'd seen something impossible before the end. After that night, the jungle stopped singing. Chickens disappeared from pens. Dogs refused to go outside, and farmers found claw marks on the trunks of banana trees 15 feet off the ground. Then came the howls. Long, guttural, echoing through the valley like something halfway between a roar and laughter. The elders spoke the name in hushed tones. Siar Saming the demon tiger, a beast born from blood and possession, cursed to wear both human and animal skin. They said that when a tiger consumed too many human souls, it began to take on their essence, their rage, their intelligence. And when the curse was strong enough, it could walk among men. Pran didn't believe in legends. Not really. But when he saw his brother's body, and when he heard that sound in the night, something inside him changed. He packed his rifle, his father's old talisman, and 2 days' worth of food, and set off into the jungle before dawn. The villagers tried to stop him. "You can't kill a Siar Saming," they warned. "You shoot it, it bleeds like a man. You stab it, it screams like a child. But when it kills you, it keeps your soul." He went anyway. Now, after hours of walking, he found himself deep in the part of the jungle locals called Dongkyang, the Silent Zone. Even the wind seemed afraid to move here. The canopy blocked out most of the sunlight, casting everything in a greenish haze. His boots sank slightly into the wet earth with every step. He paused beside a fallen log to drink from his canteen. That's when he noticed it, the smell. Sharp, metallic, foul, blood. Pran followed it cautiously, pushing through the underbrush until he came to a small clearing. At the center lay a buffalo carcass, its stomach torn open, ribs snapped like brittle sticks. Flies swarmed around it. But what made Pran's skin crawl wasn't the animal. It was the footprints surrounding it. They weren't right. At first glance, they looked like tiger prints. But each paw mark had something extra, an impression of toes. Human toes. Pran's heart pounded in his chest. He crouched down, touching one of the prints with his fingertips. The ground was still damp. Whatever had made these tracks was close. He raised his rifle slowly and scanned the trees. The forest was still again. Not even the insects dared to move. Then, somewhere to his right, came the sound of snapping branches. He spun toward it, finger tightening on the trigger. Through the dense vines, he caught a glimpse of movement. A shape crouched low, moving on all fours. It was fast, too fast for any man, but when the creature turned its head slightly, he saw them, eyes glowing faintly, red in the shadows. Pran froze, the rifle trembling in his hands. For a split second, the shape seemed to stand upright, taller than a man, its skin shifting like something trying to escape from underneath. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The jungle fell silent once more. But Pran knew then, without question, he wasn't hunting anymore. He was being hunted. Pran stayed perfectly still, the rifle steady against his shoulder, his pulse hammering in his ears. The jungle had swallowed whatever he'd seen, but the echo of movement still lingered, branches swaying where something massive had passed. He listened hard, straining to separate sound from imagination. All he could hear was the faint rustle of leaves and the soft patter of dripping water from the canopy. He exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. The mind could play tricks in this place. Tigers were quiet hunters, ghosts in fur, capable of vanishing between heartbeats. But what he'd seen wasn't a tiger. The eyes were wrong, too high, too red, too aware. He crouched and studied the tracks again. The mix of man and beast. The weight of the prints. Whatever had left them wasn't running. It had been walking, stalking. Pran rose carefully and continued forward, marking the trail with small cuts on the tree trunks using his knife. Each step took him deeper into the part of the forest even hunters avoided. The deeper he went, the stronger the smell became, something between wet fur and rotting flesh. He soon reached a shallow stream. The water was murky. The bed littered with bones, small animals, mostly monkeys and birds. But one looked disturbingly human. He crouched, brushing away the mud, and froze. It was a hand. Not fresh, but not ancient either. The flesh had long gone, yet the fingers were curled, the nails cracked and black. Around the wrist, he noticed something that made his stomach drop, a fragment of red cloth tied in a loop, a monk's prayer band. His own father wore one like it when he was buried. A chill ran through him. He dropped the bone and stood quickly, scanning the trees. He suddenly felt watched again, that heavy, unseen stare pressing down from every direction. And then, from somewhere in the distance, came a sound that didn't belong to any living animal, a low, guttural growl that rose into something almost human, almost speech. It twisted through the forest, deep and mocking. Pran gripped his rifle tighter. "Show yourself," he muttered. Nothing. Then, a whisper, very soft, carried by the wind. "Pran, He froze. The voice was male, familiar. He turned sharply. No one, just the empty jungle. Pran, the voice called again, closer this time. Brother! His chest tightened. It couldn't be. The tone, the cadence, it was his brother's voice. He knew it as surely as his own heartbeat. He swallowed hard. Kiet? The forest answered with silence, then faint laughter. His brother had been dead for 2 weeks. Pran's grip on the rifle faltered. He took a few hesitant steps forward. Kiet? He called again, louder. If that's you, answer me. The laughter came again, but it sounded wrong. It started soft, then cracked midway into a growl, turning into something guttural and feral. Branches rustled nearby. Something large moved just beyond the stream, hidden behind the trees. Pran lifted his rifle, pointing toward the sound. Don't come closer, he shouted. I'll shoot! The laughter stopped. For a few seconds there was only silence. Then a shape stepped into view. It was a man, or at least it looked like one at first glance. He was thin, covered in dirt, his clothes torn and caked with blood. But as he stepped closer, the light filtering through the leaves caught his face, and Pran felt his stomach twist. The man's eyes glowed faintly red. His teeth were too sharp. His skin stretched tight across his cheekbones, and when he smiled, it wasn't human. Brother, the man said, voice hoarse. You shouldn't have come. Pran stumbled back, raising the rifle. You're not him. The man's grin widened. He begged me to let him live, he said softly. He cried for you. Pran's finger tightened on the trigger. Don't speak his name. The figure took another step closer, his movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet straining against its own strings. The smell of decay hit Pran full force. I was hungry, the figure continued. Now, I'm not. The words slurred slightly, as if the mouth forming them didn't quite understand how to be human anymore. Pran fired. The sound tore through the jungle, scattering birds into the air. The figure jerked backward, hit square in the chest. But instead of falling, it staggered once, then straightened. The bullet wound was there bleeding, but even as Pran watched, the flesh began to move, the blood thickening and closing the hole. The man tilted his head, his grin returning. Tigers don't die easy, brother. Pran fired again, and again. The shots echoed, but the figure didn't fall. It dropped to all fours instead, its spine arching, bones cracking audibly beneath the skin. Stripes began to appear across its back, splitting the flesh as if something underneath were tearing its way out. Pran stumbled back, horror gripping his chest. The creature let out a sound, a deep, horrible snarl that carried the faintest edge of human laughter. It lunged toward him. Pran fired one last shot before diving aside, rolling into the underbrush. The bullet hit, and this time the thing let out a scream that was both man and beast. The jungle erupted in chaos, birds shrieking, branches snapping, leaves raining down. When Pran looked up again, the clearing was empty. Only the smell of blood remained. He lay there for a long time, shaking, staring at the place where the creature had stood. His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. The stories were true. The Siar Saming was real. But one thing haunted him more than the monster itself. The creature's voice just before it lunged had whispered something else, something no stranger could have known. Tell Mother I'm home. The jungle didn't sound the same anymore. The normal rhythm of insects and birds was gone, replaced by an unnatural stillness that wrapped around Pran like a shroud. He crouched low in the underbrush, sweat dripping down his temples, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. The gunpowder smell still lingered from his last shot, but what unsettled him most was the silence that followed it. No echo, no response, as if the forest itself had swallowed the sound whole. He scanned the trees. Nothing moved. No sign of the creature, but the claw marks on the ground were still fresh, massive, uneven, and deeper than any tiger's. The sight made his stomach twist. If the stories were true, he hadn't just wounded it, he'd angered it. He reloaded the rifle with trembling hands and backed away slowly, careful not to make noise. His boot caught on something, a piece of torn fabric, half buried in the mud. He bent down and pulled it free. It was a shirt, human-sized, blood-stained and ripped across the chest. The fabric was familiar. It had the same red stitching as his brother's old hunting clothes. Pran's throat tightened. He remembered that shirt clearly. His brother had worn it on the day he disappeared. He dropped the fabric and stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "That thing was lying. It was lying." A voice answered from the trees. "Why do you run, Pran?" He froze. It was his brother's voice again, but this time it came from everywhere, echoing through the forest as if the trees themselves were speaking. He aimed his rifle wildly, spinning in circles. "Show yourself." A low chuckle followed. Then, softly, "You said you'd find me. You promised." Pran's heart hammered in his chest. "You're not my brother. You're something else." The air shifted, and the smell hit him again, blood and rot, thick and clinging. The voice came closer, whispering in his ear, though no one was there. "You killed me, Pran." He stumbled backward and tripped over a root, falling hard to the ground. The rifle slipped from his grasp and landed several feet away. When he looked up, he saw movement, human-shaped shadows flickering between the trees, dozens of them. Men, women, children, all standing silently in the fog, their eyes glowing faintly red. He blinked, and they were gone. Pran dragged himself to his feet, breathing hard. He retrieved his rifle and kept moving, his boots crunching over damp leaves. The forest had grown darker, the light fading faster than it should have. Every step he took felt heavier, slower. He was disoriented now, unsure which direction led back to the village. Then, ahead through the trees, he saw light a small, flickering glow. A campfire. Relief surged through him. Maybe another hunter. Maybe help. He approached cautiously, crouching behind a fallen log. A man sat by the fire. He was older, his face weathered and lined, his eyes tired. A hunting rifle lay beside him. He stirred a small pot over the flames and hummed softly to himself. Pran stepped into the clearing, keeping his voice low. "Uncle, are you from Gruang Dong?" The old man looked up slowly. "I was," he said. His tone was strange, calm, almost too calm. "You shouldn't be here." Pran frowned. "You've seen it, haven't you? The tiger?" The old man poked the fire with a stick, the sparks rising into the night air. "You think it's just a tiger?" He looked at Pran, his gaze heavy. "The Siar Saming isn't a beast. It's a curse. Every time you kill one, the spirit of the last person, it, devoured, becomes the next." Pran felt his stomach twist. "What are you saying?" The old man smiled faintly. "When your brother died, his soul didn't leave. It stayed here. It's inside the tiger now. You can't kill it without killing what's left of him." The words hit like a blow. Pran shook his head. "No, you're wrong. I saw it. It's a monster." "Then why did it call your name?" the old man asked quietly. The forest wind picked up, scattering ash into the air. The fire flickered, and for a moment, the old man's face seemed to shift, his eyes glowing red, his smile stretching too wide. Pran stepped back, gripping his rifle. "What are you?" The old man tilted his head. "I told you, I was from Gruang Dong." And then he was gone. The fire vanished, leaving Pran in darkness once more. The smell of smoke lingered, but the clearing was empty. No footprints, no pot, no man. From behind him, the voice returned closer now, deeper. "You can't save him, Pran." The sound of heavy breathing followed. Then a growl. He turned and saw two glowing eyes staring back at him through the trees, closer this time, burning like coals. The jungle came alive with whispers. 100 voices, murmuring his name, repeating it over and over until it became meaningless. "Pran, Pran, Pran." He fired into the darkness, but the sound was swallowed by the forest, and this time something answered, not with a roar but with laughter. The laughter echoed through the trees, bouncing off trunks and dying leaves, circling Pran until he could no longer tell where it came from. It was human and animal at once, low and rumbling, then high and broken, twisting between tones like it couldn't decide which voice to wear. Pran gripped his rifle so tightly that his knuckles ached. He spun in place, back pressed against a tree, scanning the darkness for movement. The forest had become an ocean of shifting shadows, the air heavy with the stench of rot and fur. Then silence. The jungle seemed to exhale. Something was behind him. He turned slowly. At first, he saw only the faint outline of a man standing in the clearing, tall, barefoot, his body marked with deep claw wounds that hadn't bled. His eyes glowed faintly red in the half-light. "Brother," the man said softly. Pran's throat tightened. "You're not him." The man tilted his head. "Then why do I remember your face? Why do I remember the river, the hunt, the night you left me behind?" Pran's voice cracked. "That's not true. I looked for you. I buried what was left." The man smiled. It was almost kind. Almost. "You buried the body," he said, "but not the soul." He took a step forward, and the light shifted. For a moment, Pran saw what lay beneath stripes, twitching beneath the skin like worms under flesh. The man's movements were wrong, jerky, and fluid all at once, his limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. Pran raised his rifle. "Stay back." The smile faded. The man's voice deepened, layered with something else. A second voice, a growl curling beneath the words. "You came to kill me, didn't you?" "I came to end this," Pran said. The man's body began to twitch violently. His spine arched, bones cracking like dry wood. Skin tore open across his shoulders, revealing flashes of fur and sinew beneath. His voice split between human and animal. "Then kill me, Hunter. Kill your brother again." He lunged. Pran fired. The shot tore through his chest, the recoil slamming into his shoulder, but the figure didn't fall. The wound bled black, thick and steaming. The man staggered, his face twisting in agony before his body convulsed again. His hands hit the ground, claws tearing through skin where fingers once were. Then, slowly, he began to stand on all fours. Pran stumbled backward, firing again. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, but this time it laughed a deep, guttural sound that rattled through the trees. The transformation continued, bones breaking, joints reversing, the skin on its face splitting down the middle as a long snout forced its way through. Its eyes glowed brighter, its teeth glistening in the dim light. The Siar Saming. It was neither man nor beast, something in between. Its body was striped with torn patches of human skin still clinging to fur. Its voice came in 2 layers, the low rumble of a tiger and the trembling cry of a man. "Do you see me now?" it hissed. "Do you see what you left behind?" Pran turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth. The jungle erupted behind him with the sound of pursuit claws ripping into soil, breath like wind through broken reeds. He could feel it following, fast and close. He dove behind a fallen log, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. The sound of snapping branches circled him again. "Pran," it whispered. The voice came from everywhere at once. "You can't kill me. I'm part of you now." Pran's finger hovered over the trigger. "No," he whispered. "You're part of them, the thing that feeds on death." The creature's laugh rippled through the night. "And you've killed, haven't you? You've spilled blood. You belong to me more than you know." Pran fired blindly into the dark. One shot, two, three. The echoes faded, then silence again. He crouched low, heart pounding, listening. No movement, no breath. Just the thick, wet air of the jungle. He stood, slowly, gripping the rifle like a lifeline. And then he saw it, the shape slumped against a tree. A man's body, human, still. It was his brother. Pran's gun lowered slowly. His breath caught in his chest. The body was intact, but the eyes were open, staring at him with a faint, empty sadness. He took a hesitant step forward, then another. "Brother," he whispered. The man blinked and smiled. A shadow moved behind him, massive, striped, breathing. The tiger emerged from the darkness, its body larger than any living animal, its eyes glowing like embers. It stood behind the man like a mirror, every movement syncing perfectly, like the two were the same being. The man spoke, voice trembling. "You can't kill one without the other." Pran's vision blurred with fear and confusion. "What are you?" The answer came from both mouths, at once the man and the tiger. "I am what's left when the living and the dead refuse to let go." The tiger lunged. Pran fired. The bullet struck the man in the chest. Both figures screamed, one human, one inhuman, before collapsing into a heap of fur, blood, and silence. For a moment, the jungle was still again. Pran staggered forward, smoke rising from the barrel of his rifle. The body lay motionless. Then, faintly, the man's eyes opened once more, and in his brother's voice, soft as breath, he whispered, "You killed the wrong one." Pran knelt beside the body, his heart thundering so hard it drowned out the forest itself. The air was thick with the smell of iron and smoke. The shape on the ground, half human, half beast, lay motionless, its chest still rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Blood pooled into the soil, spreading like ink through the roots. He didn't know whether he'd killed a man or a monster, maybe both. For a long moment, Pran couldn't move. He just stared. The creature's face shifted under the dim moonlight, the lines blurring between human and animal, his brother's mouth, the tiger's eyes, the same scar that Kiet had on his left cheek. It was impossible, yet unmistakable. He reached forward, hesitating only a second, before placing his hand on the creature's shoulder. The skin was hot, feverish, the heartbeat faint, but still there. Then, a voice rasped from its throat, hoarse, broken, and familiar. "Brother!" Pran's hand jerked back. He stumbled to his feet, shaking his head. "No, you're not him. You can't be." The figure coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "You shot me, like you did before." The words froze Pran in place. "What do you mean before?" The creature's breathing hitched. "When the tiger came, you ran. You left me there." Memories crashed into Pran's mind the night of the hunt 2 weeks ago, the flash of movement in the trees, the sound of snarling. He remembered firing blindly into the darkness, then the scream that followed. He had assumed it was the tiger. He had never found Kiet's body, only the remains the next morning, torn and mangled. His stomach turned. "No," he whispered. "That wasn't me." But deep down, something in him cracked. He remembered the blood on his hands that night, the single bullet missing from his rifle. The figure let out a weak, rattling laugh. You killed me first, brother. The tiger only found what you left behind. Pran stumbled backward, shaking his head violently. No, I came back for you. I buried you. You buried my shell, it croaked. But the spirit stays where it dies. The Siar Saming found me. It took what was left. The jungle stirred around them, as if reacting to the confession. The trees groaned softly, the wind whispering through the leaves in a voice that almost sounded human. Pran's mind reeled. If what the creature said was true, the curse hadn't started with the tiger, it had started with him. The creature shifted, trying to sit up. Its hands, if they could still be called, that dug into the dirt, claws half-formed through torn skin. Its face was twisted with pain, but its eyes, Kiet's eyes, looked clearer now. It's never just the beast that kills, it whispered. It's the anger, the blood, the hate. Pran sank to his knees again, rifle slipping from his grasp. Tell me how to end it. Please. The creature looked up, its voice trembling. You can't kill it. You can only feed it. Pran frowned, tears blurring his. Vision. Feed it? With what? The creature smiled faintly, revealing rows of jagged, shifting teeth. Regret. And then it said something that made Pran's blood run cold. The Siar Saming doesn't come from the jungle. It comes from men like us. A sound rippled through the forest, a low, distant growl, deep as thunder. The shadows between the trees began to move again, slow and deliberate. Another pair of eyes appeared in the darkness, glowing like coals. Then another, and another, dozens of them. Pran's body went rigid. The forest floor around him began to tremble as shapes moved between the trees' striped forms, crawling, limping, their bodies half human, half beast. The jungle was full of them. They were all hunters once, the creature whispered. All killers. The curse grows stronger with every soul it claims. The ground beneath Pran's knees was slick with blood now. He could hear it whispering low voices, pleading, angry, hungry. Faces flickered between the trunks, familiar ones. The villagers who'd vanished, the farmers, his own father. He looked back down at the creature, his brother, whose breathing had grown faint. I can stop this, Pran said. There has to be a way. Kiet, if it was still. Kiet shook his head slowly. There's only one way to silence it. He reached up weakly, his clawed hand pressing against Pran's chest. You carry my blood. End what you began. Pran stared at him, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on his face. You want me to... Do it, Kiet rasped. Or it takes you next. Pran hesitated, the rifle shaking in his hands. Around them, the jungle howled, the other beasts inching closer, circling. He could feel their heat, smell the blood on their breath. Kiet's voice grew faint. Do it, brother, before dawn. The first rays of light began to filter through the canopy, faint and gray. Pran closed his eyes. I'm sorry. The gunshot echoed once, through the forest. The sound rippled outward, scattering birds into the sky. When the smoke cleared, the clearing was empty. The body was gone. The only trace left behind was a single paw print, half human, half beast, pressed into the mud beside his own. Pran stared at it for a long time, then lifted his head toward the distant sound of wind moving through the trees. The jungle was quiet again. But somewhere far off, faint and haunting, came the sound of laughter, deep, echoing, and unmistakably his brother's. The sun rose weakly over the jungles of Gruang Dong, its pale light cutting through the mist like thin blades. The forest looked still again, peaceful, almost innocent, but Pran knew better. He could feel it breathing beneath the calm. He walked through the clearing in a daze, his rifle hanging limply at his side. The jungle around him was quiet now, too quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. Only the faint echo of that final gunshot seemed to linger, trapped between the trees. When he reached the edge of the forest, he looked back one last time. The prints were still there, his and the beast's side by side, leading deeper into the dark. He thought about burying them, erasing every trace of what had happened. But somehow, he knew it wouldn't matter. Some things refused to stay buried. By the time Pran returned to Gruang Dong village, the air had changed. The villagers stared at him from their doorways, whispering prayers beneath their breath. Someone must have heard the gunshot, but no one asked questions. They only looked at him with quiet fear. That night, Pran sat outside his house, watching the jungle from afar. A faint breeze drifted through the fields, carrying the smell of rain and earth, and underneath it, something sharper, metallic, animal. He tried to tell himself it was over, that he had broken the curse, ended the suffering. But when he looked down at his hands, he froze. Dried blood still clung to his palms. It wasn't his brother's. It wasn't the beast's. It was his. The skin beneath had begun to change faint lines, dark and striped, threading up his wrists. He rubbed at them desperately, but they didn't fade. They seemed to pulse, to move. From the distance, deep within the forest, came a low growl followed by laughter. Pran looked toward the tree line, eyes wide, breath shallow. Then, faintly, beneath the sound of the wind, came a voice that whispered his name. Brother, I hope you enjoyed these stories. Tomorrow we will be uploading another terrifying story. Feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications to never miss another scary video. I upload almost every day. Wish you all the best.